And we are on. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Gnosis. We are finally back here. Man, it has been a delay. I apologize. We're really kind of sorting things out. We got really busy, and then I got sick and couldn't really talk. So we've been doing like these little changes and plans. So hopefully this doesn't have to happen again. We will try to record a few extra podcasts within the next couple weeks. That way, in case something similar to this happens, in the event that it were to, we will have backup episodes to pop up and it'll be all good to go. Additionally, to cut corners on time, I think doing the podcast clips are very time consuming over hours. So it is just better for me to have short clips that we drop every other Saturday, about 10 to 15 minutes long. They'll be individual, and I think you guys will like those because I'll be free speaking a lot more, which is something I'm going to be getting into. Because a lot of people don't necessarily like the formality that I bring. They're like, yeah, it's a little too formal for me. Go out there, don't be afraid. And I totally get where they're coming from because it's kind of a balance you have to find. So this episode especially is going to be great for that because this is my vegan journey. This is my vegan story, which is what it'll be titled, My Vegan Story. As you'll see, it's essentially my rise and fall of my veganism, right? So you'll see why I went into it and why I'm out of it. And we'll kind of talk about what this means in the world because, you know, if you really kind of look at this at face value, break it down by logic, zero emotion, zero anything else, just straight logic, it's nonsensical, right? And so you have to wonder, why would somebody make this like extreme decision? It's not, even keto is not that extreme. Yes, keto's extreme, but so is kind of carnivore to some extent, right? These are definitely highly eliminative or exclusionary diets, right? When it comes to veganism, it's way different though. Not only is it extremely exclusive in what it allows and what it excludes, right? But it is a moral thing. It is in some ways it's its own community, right? There's a vegan community, and with that comes this sort of cult-like thinking, right? We see this with religion, more so back in the day, not really anymore. Religion's kind of died out in the West. But you get my point, right? The idea of religion being very strict, that essentially, that moral superior, what I call it the moral superior complex, it has branched off as communities die, family communities, church communities, even sports communities, as those kind of go under the rug. These other political-based, ideologically-based communities are coming out now, and you guys know what I mean. As a result of all this is what happens, right? Now the problem with that is that moral superior complex issue is also in the mix of all this. So when it comes to something like veganism, not only is it an extreme diet, in the same way you could argue keto is an extreme diet, very specific. However, with veganism, it's also kind of a lifestyle because you can't get certain clothing, you can't get certain bedding. And then additionally, this is where the other issue kind of kicks in. It's a moral issue. It's 100% a moral issue, and that's why I'm talking about the moral superior, because veganism is a community, right? And this is what people forget, is that when you're a vegan, you're now like doing the right thing. You're the best person, and they extended it to not just being animals. Now it's the planet. So now you're saving the planet. So you're really like the shit if you're a vegan, according to the mainstream. And this is kind of corrupting the logic, right? Because now this is an emotional-based reaction that people are getting. It's very reactive. There is no logic in this at all. And you have to wonder why someone would kind of get in that. Now, I'm not sitting here to shun 100%, right? Because essentially everyone is different, and that is an important thing to remember. We all thrive differently, and that's the goal. We should all figure out how to thrive. So we should experiment with inclusive diets, go to elimination diets. Geez, that was a tongue twister for me. Wow. So you go to these elimination diets. From there, you kind of put together exactly the diet you want. If milk's kind of maybe get lactose pills. If that works, that's great. Okay, raw milk. But don't just eliminate dairy because the government tells you to eliminate dairy. You know what I mean? And that was kind of me. I was trying to be healthier, and I'm like, how can I do this? So I kind of gave up these certain things, kind of went on this extreme diet because I was like, you know what, this is a big change, and I need to do a big change so I can turn my diet around. And boy, was I wrong. However, that mindset of me needing something filled, well, veganism was there to fill that gap in my brain. However, when you get in there and you're now vegan, it's overwhelming how much the community is ever present online, especially. So you're just seeing it repeated that you're just the best person, that it's the climate, that it's this, that, and the other thing. So now you start to kind of repeat that, and now you're kind of in a little gang where you can gang up on people and express and project how you feel like such a crappy person. So now you go out and you tell people this, that, and the other thing. And I was kind of falling into that issue to some extent. I was becoming a part of the problem to some extent, right? And it was very weird looking back. I was kind of partaking in this toxic culture to some extent. Again, I'll highlight that to some extent. And I very quickly noticed the toxicity of that and realized, wow, this is interesting. And that's why here we are having this episode, because in order to be a vegan, you have to be willing to take an extreme. But I think once you get in that community, especially when you're younger, there's a lot of gaps in our lives, right? Like, again, social communities are they don't really exist. So it's definitely a place where you can find that. In the same way people may find it with other things, be it a political party or be it, other communities, as I've said before. And again, it's the cult-like thinking that these communities they start, I guess, partaking in, I guess you could say. And that is just because there's nothing else. So there's literally like no religion, right? And the younger generation, it seems to be, I don't know, there's some mixed stats on that, but I think a lot of us would say, well, there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily established religion with an establishment, right? However, there'll be a vegan, which is its own establishment. That's where people kind of get these communities mixed up, because it is a very weird thinking. The moral superior complex kicks in. Everyone thinks they're a better person because they're vegan, so they can kind of attack. And we saw this with COVID. So it's definitely a real thing that people have this emptiness that they feel where it's almost like a reverse projection. They feel so crappy about themselves that they start projecting that by being like they scold others. Like, oh, well, the government said you're a shitty person if you don't wear a mask, so wear a mask. And because of that cult thinking, that moral superior thinking, there was never debate. There was never conversation. It was simply you were a murderer or you wore a mask. It was one or the other. And then they started reversing the word Karen on people that didn't want to wear masks, which makes zero sense, because how can you be a Karen for just not doing anything? Usually Karens are obnoxious. They're out there being extra. You kind of walking in there without a mask, then being stopped and saying, I don't want to wear a mask. How does that make you a Karen? I would say the Karen would be the one that's like spraying Lysol on people's faces and throwing like plastic shields at them and stuff. That is the Karen to me. But no, things kind of change with the mainstream, right? And we all know that whatever is the interest of the powers that be is going to be projected through media, because everybody acts like they have a choice. But we really do have an illusion of choice. And if you can't see that, then you're probably not going to like this episode very much, because I could already understand sort of how you may be thinking, which is very sad, but that's okay. We're all different, and that's fine. However, I just think people need to be a little more self-aware of this, and this was probably one of the biggest moments where I had to reveal to myself that I needed to be more self-aware, because I was becoming part of the problem. Now, the second reason why someone might go vegan might skip I want to be healthy, I want to do something different. It might just be exactly that they want that community. So that's usually where the very toxic people come into play. So for someone to make a decision like this, again, it's usually because they're missing something, and that's fine. Again, a lot of people are missing things in the U.S. We have the face of the U.S. is a fat one. We are very obese here, very unhealthy, and we eat a ton of calories, yet we're very overweight because there's no nutrition in that. So people are definitely running around in circles trying to figure out how the hell to lose weight. That is the sad part of this. You'll see very obese people running on the treadmill an hour every day, killing themselves, just to never lose weight, because that doesn't burn fat. It really doesn't. And people need to know these things, but you're not told these things. You're told that mini wheats are healthier for you than eggs are. And nobody talks about how strength training is what burns fat and not cardio. And nobody talks about how fat burns fat, not makes you fat. These are all things that are not talked about. So people, you can imagine all these things I'm saying right now. put your brain in the position that they're in, and you would probably be confused too. You would probably be looking for something, and that something right now is veganism. It's literally all over the internet. It's everywhere, and it's been like that for the last 5 years. I think there's a lot more of the other side kind of coming at it now, which is something you haven't seen more like recently. This is definitely a newer thing. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. However, for me, again, looking to be healthier, it was very interesting how I gained a lot of weight very quickly. And that essentially came from the lack of protein. High carbs, not that much protein, overeating, and on top of that, I was still eating processed foods because a lot of them were vegan. So that was something where I didn't want to do the work. I was almost like lying to myself, and I kind of knew it, which was kind of weird. But again, you're just in that place running around in circles where it's crazy because even I know about the lies about how fat is not bad for you, and yet I was still kind of falling for the same propaganda. So it just goes to show you in a certain times in your life and with a certain mindset, you can really kind of fall for a lot of things. So it's important to stick strong with what you believe, or you will literally fall for everything. So that's definitely an advice tip right there for sure, because I was gaining weight crazy, very crazy. Like, it was very weird how quickly I was gaining weight. And then I kind of plateaued a little, just kind of stayed there. And then I probably gained a little bit more. And then I was like, crap. And then, this is over the time of like a year that this whole issue is happening. So it's definitely weird, but I don't want to give it up yet because it's been so short. So I kind of do that for, I want to say I was vegan for like a year and like 3/4, if I remember correctly. So in that time, I definitely gained a ton of weight, which was not good. My metabolic function was disastrous. And it really came about because of the processed foods and not enough protein. So I was probably also overeating. Even though the calories in, calories out is not necessarily a complete accurate picture, I was definitely eating way too much. And it is very weird, but I started to realize, okay, yeah, these vegan meats, after reading the ingredients, I'm like, how can they really be healthier than meat? So now, because I'm in this position, I'm here trying to convince myself, how is it that this is healthier than meat? And that question's just in my head. How is this healthier than regular meat? It's got like 50 ingredients, but I'm convincing myself it is. That's what's so crazy. You can't even in my position right now, I can't even like fathom that I didn't realize this, or that I did realize it. It was just that it was almost like that part of my brain turned off. I didn't act on it. It was very weird. It's very weird, but again, this is why it's important to be a strong person, and in your weaker moments to try to get out of those as quick as possible. And a lot of people are in their weak moments because they're very overweight, they're very unhappy, and you become very vulnerable to attacks, right? I'm not saying these people are like always open and vulnerable in that way. I'm just saying that you yourself are vulnerable to any attack, anything mainstream shoved in your face, and it gives you a community. It gives you a sense that you're doing something better, and you're told it's going to be an easy way out and still a delicious way out. Well, then, hey, why not chug down vegan chocolate milk and eat a whole bunch of vegan cookies, right? You really can't really argue on that point. It's more so the common sense that should kick in, but common sense is not that common, especially when you fall into this type of stuff. And again, that was my situation. So I became very aware that these processed meats were not that good. So there was a point where I kind of was like, well, I should probably not try to eat these. And I remember thinking like, oh, how do I redo my menu so I don't have to eat this? But it kind of became difficult, because if it wasn't lentils and beans, it had to be the Beyond Burger. I wasn't getting any protein or iron. And that is kind of the weird thing here. You are like really struggling when you're vegan. You're really struggling because you're not hitting. There's no way you're hitting your macros correctly. There's no way. It's always high carb, medium fat, and low protein. The complete opposite. It should be high fat, medium protein, and low carb. At least ideally, right? Obviously, depending on what you need, maybe you work better with carbs than you do fat. But protein should definitely be up there. It should not be the lowest. Some people, they make it the highest, which is kind of crazy, and that can have its own issues. But if you do well, who am I to say that you shouldn't do it, right? So again, this is a very interesting situation for me because I am picking up on it, but I can't really do too much because if I do, well, then I might run into other problems. And so eventually I did kind of try to cut out the crap towards the end of the vegan cycle. And this is where I'm slowly eating less calories, eating a little more nutrient dense, a little better, and little by little I kind of do that. But as I do that, my calorie intake just completely drops, and I'm assuming that my protein intake is also dropping, which is not necessarily good at all. It's really a problem. It's still very high carbs. Even though they might be a little bit better carbs, they're not as simple as they were, not that long before, but they're still very, very high carb, which is just not necessarily ideal because you're not getting enough protein. That's really the issue here. You're not getting enough protein, and that is its own problem. And then, of course, the exercise, which I just didn't even have the motive. Like, it's not even the motivation, right? There's that quote, Andrew Tate says it. It's very popular. The how people who go to the gym when they don't want to, it's not that they have motivation, they have something else. It's self-discipline. They have discipline. Like, that's what he highlights, discipline, in the video. And that's more like, I could not really phrase it a better way because it is really like, motivation is kind of a stupid word. Like, at the end of the day, every decision you make is 100% your choice. And yes, we're put in tough, sometimes there are very tough situations, right? And who knows what you would do in that situation. So yeah, that's why some sort of like understanding of one another is important. However, it's very clear that people's outcomes are a result of their choices 99% of the time, right? There's a sort of, one, a self-awareness, but two, people need to be accountable for their own actions, right? And you end up where you are because of that. So I was not in that mindset at all. I was probably not in that mindset because I wasn't metabolically functioning well. So how can my brain function well? How can I think I need to go to the gym? It's not really that I want to go to the gym. I need to go to the gym. No, it was more like, well, I kind of want to. I need to do this. You're just kind of arguing with your own mind. So you do this little stuff here and there, and it just doesn't stick. And this happened even when I first started being vegan, like towards more so. Well, I guess it would have been like about a year later, that I really tried to actually lose weight, but it didn't really work well. Then I did another cycle of that. It didn't really work well. And this is what I'm saying. I think I had 3 cycles of working out within like the last couple years in which it just didn't work. And this is probably my 4th cycle now where I'm really back in on it 100% with the right diet, a fully balanced diet, going back to my roots, going back to just straight logic, to straight nutrition labels, to straight whole foods, right? 100% whole foods, eliminate the synthetic stuff. And let me tell you, my mindset's in a way more clear space. Not as much anxiety, not as much, whatever you want to call it, depression, sad. It's really just unfortunate. Living in America, in a big city, will lead you to feel sad to some extent. Then you go to the smaller cities, you probably will too. Then you go to a smaller city, a little better, and it just kind of trickles down there. So I think most Americans kind of feel weird sort of presence when they're around. Like, that's just what it is. So I think most people can relate to the fact that we all kind of have a weird feeling. And it's just because the environment's just not there. There's a lot of angry people out here. Unless you're in a small community, there's a lot of sad people out there. There's a lot of sad things to see. There's a lot of sad news. So it doesn't help. It definitely does not help. But when you're in the right space, you can kind of block that out, and you know what you need to do and what you want to do, and you balance it out. But going to the gym turns from what you need to do to also what you want to do. And that is the whole self-discipline thing. You start to enjoy what you need to do. And that's kind of the growth that takes proper health with like overall. And I was missing that. I was completely missing that. So finally, as we end towards my vegan journey, right, I start to feel really bad, like not healthy at all. Not only is it very clear that I weigh more, that is 100% clear. So I go do little HIIT workouts, which definitely works. They do work. But again, like I said, the consistency was not there. And this was like my third cycle. So that was not there. But I was also feeling horrible. I was getting these headaches. I was getting weird cravings. It was just not a good situation at all. And I was craving fish for a while. And that's when you kind of know it's bad. When you start actually craving meat, you don't really want to get to that point. Because that's like your body like, yo, listen, mother, like you need to eat this specific food. Because usually your body's like, okay, you want magnesium? Okay, we'll crave chocolate. We'll crave this little thing here. But now it's like you need some mother effing meat right now, bro. Like you're about to die. I wasn't about to die, but you know what I mean? Very malnourished. And I put that in terms of like a modern way. Obviously, I'm not like the Haitians who are in the most unfortunate circumstance, right? These are the worst conditions, but I was definitely doing a lot of harm to myself. My body was not in a good spot. The headaches were pounding. You just didn't feel right. The electrolyte imbalance was off. You can kind of feel it within your heart rate. A lot of weird stuff, right? So eventually, and this is what was so crazy, because eventually I knew I needed to eat the fish. I'm like, I'm craving this. I need to start with fish. I need to get back in on this. And with the help of some friends, I was finally able to go in and actually eat this fish. The problem being it took so long. And the reason why it took long is because there was a sort of wrongful feeling within. It's almost like I felt like I was doing the wrong thing by doing what was right for me. That's what's kind of scary about it. And we've seen this happen with vegan influencers online. So essentially my rise to veganism comes because I'm missing something, and I think veganism can kind of fill that gap. And it ends up seeming at first as if it's filling up every gap. And then slowly I see the downside of it and ignore it, play it off like, oh, well, it's probably this, that, and the other thing. I just keep convincing myself. And this is what a lot of people do in America to prevent accountability and to prevent self-awareness. We look at other things. We try to make excuses. We try to convince ourselves. And so little by little, you just can't do it anymore when you start to feel horrible, like the headaches were really bad. So then you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, now I know what I need to do, but I'm kind of like scared. I want to still be able to say I'm a vegan. I want to still be a part of this group. It's such a cult-like thinking, and I think a lot of people can relate to this because, as I said, those vegan influencers, it's the same thing. I think her name is Gianna or something like that. She was getting attacked because she got caught eating a salmon during her pregnancy, in her first stages of pregnancy. She was eating fish, and then it went to meat, and everyone was attacking her. And I think, to be fair, though, she was promoting a vegan lifestyle on YouTube while not being vegan. And I guess, sure, we call it problematic, whatever, but that's kind of like you buying vegan food from companies that have literally killed humans with their food. So I don't really see why it's the biggest deal, but I guess, we can definitely have understanding and middle ground on that argument. However, what's crazy, though, is she had to hide this and couldn't just come out to her community and say, listen, I'm going to go and add meat and I'll do more recipes here. And I think she truly felt like she couldn't do that. And that's probably why she had to lie. So that's the other half of that. But my main point here is that's what's crazy, is that the people would never understand that she needed to make this health decision. And it was proven in the comments. They called her all these disgusting words. They were very mean to her. And it's unfortunate because I remember when that happened, I believe I was still vegan, and I was like, oh, wow, what a fake, F her, right? Like, you're kind of thinking like she's fake. But now I'm like, well, that's actually kind of crazy on on that community's part, right? That's who has the real issue. So it's just kind of interesting to see how that unfolds, because I could totally relate to that mindset, right? Or fearing that, or being, just in some ways there's a parallel there that I felt weird about eating fish simply over a label, which is crazy because America is all about labels now. Everyone wants to be this label of that community, this community, that, that political party, that other political party, right? Is very much a weird tribal our tribal instincts have become like they're just pouring gasoline on that fire for sure. It's just, we have a complete wildfire right now of tribal thinking, and it's really showing its true colors. So in my case, it's very obvious that that's what was going on there, and to finally break away from that felt so good, because you really do feel free. And it's so crazy that one person can restrain themselves that much, even when it means hurting themselves. So essentially, my whole point of this thing is just to show that, yes, I have tried a vegan diet. So when people come and tell me, oh, this, that, and the other thing, I know I'm very much aware of the Sebi diet. I'm very much aware of alkalinity. I'm Robert Morris. I'm very much aware of fruitarians. I'm very much aware of all those things. I am 100% aware. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so comfortable talking about this. I have been there. I was a vegan. It went horribly. I gained a ton of weight. I felt horrible. I looked horrible. Not only that, but I couldn't even do anything right because everything was just all bad. And then I would convince myself that it wasn't, which is what a lot of people do right now. A lot of people are just completely in denial of everything going on right now. And that was me. I was kind of, to some extent, that person, because I wanted to be comfortable in what I thought was right. And it's kind of exhausting going, leaving that you're like, oh wow, I spent all this time, right? It's a little exhausting. But fortunately, I was able to break out of that, start with fish. Then I went to, I think, eggs or something. And then I went to like turkey and then chicken and then red meat. And now here we are doing it with all types of stuff. Except I'm really not that big on like shrimp. I do have lobster that I'm waiting to cook. But that's about it. I'll do the lobster once. I probably won't eat it again for months, maybe a year, just because I'm very big on the plastics in the ocean. So I've been trying to limit my fish to wild-caught salmon, not as much tuna, because, tuna is just, it's cool or whatever. It's definitely got its benefits, but I'm sure there's a lot of weird contaminants in there that selenium cannot filter out. So that's my issue with fish. But again, that's my personal thing. I mean, if we're going to go on paper, there's a reason to avoid fish, but there's also a reason to not avoid it. If that's what you can afford, if that's what's available to you, I think compared to what the average American would otherwise eat, and that is how I'm looking at all this. And that's why I had this whole conversation in the first place. That's what the whole point of this is that people would otherwise be eating worse things, and nobody seems to understand that. When you say, hey, go for conventional cheese, everyone's like, well, that's gross. It comes from conventional dairy. I agree. It's not the best, but that at least is a whole food. You're going to tell me that they should eat canola oil-based vegan cheese over that, which has protein and CLA and does it in cows, because they have all these different stomach systems, are able to filter out a lot of the crap that they're fed and that they go through to some extent. And, this whole pus thing's another one that I get a lot. It's not even really pus that's in milk, although I don't deny it, because there is like a sort of infection that they can get, and the pus does make it in the milk, because essentially, and I forget the name of it, but they're just called, they're basically just white blood cells, essentially. So these white blood cells are natural, right, to each animal. So even in human breast milk, there are those, what they call, I forget the name, it's like an endogenous cell, but it's not the word endogenous, it's a different word. I'm not even using that word correctly, right? Like, it is an in-the-body cell, like white blood cell type of thing, that's just in the breast milk of all animals, so it'll come out. However, there is actual legitimate pus that can make its way into milk, assuming that the cow is infected. However, I don't even think that those cows get milk when they're truly infected. With that being said, I still don't trust conventional dairy, and something like raw milk is usually made by farmers who care, so you can guarantee that there's no actual pus. Yes, there's going to be the white blood cells from the cow, but that's just what is in breast milk. That's a part of it. That's largely part of why nature works. There's a lot of things in milk, right? Even human milk has lactose and lactase in it. Nobody seems to really like understand that. Like, that's blows people's mind when you say that. So again, the whole point of this is just to say that there are diets that don't always work for everyone, and that could even be carnivore, right? And so it's important to understand and hear all these stories Additionally, you should also understand that objectively, a lot of the vegan substitutes are highly processed. That's objective. And what they're processed with are very bad ingredients like canola oil. Objective. Now, where it becomes subjective is, should you eat just meat because those vegan options are bad? No, maybe oats are good for you. Maybe you personally feel great with oats. Perfect. Add oats with your, like, eat oatmeal and eggs. Perfect. Oh, you don't really like eggs? That's cool. Try something else. You know what I mean? There's other things, but I'm just saying, if your issue is going to be because you want to feel like you're a good person, that's crazy, man. You know, you have to know who you are. Not only that, but if you're going to be a little like grossed out by conventional meat or conventional dairy, what else would you be drinking? Almond milk with carrageenan in it, with gums in it, with fortified minerals in it, and on top of that, sugar added? So these are things to just think about here. That's my main point, and hopefully you guys understood this. In no way am I saying just don't be vegan and go be carnivore, because I'm not carnivore either. I like to have a nice balanced diet, and I think that everyone should play around with your macros, but focus on getting enough protein, like hopefully from animal products, because those usually have better muscle building proteins. And good luck to you all. With that being said, this has been another episode of Gnosis. Remember, knowledge is power. Like always, like, subscribe, comment, share, all that. Thank you guys, and we'll see you again.